Ms. Childress, would you take the roll, please?
Representative Alleman,
He's getting the door.
Representative Angelos. Here. Representative Harrelson.
Here.
Representative Pendergraft.
Here.
Representative Sherwood.
Here.
Representative Smith.
Here.
Chairman Bear.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start our first meeting to cover bills, and we're going to start with House Bill 103, which is a
Thank you.
bill that one of our members has brought, and I'm signed on to it. And do you want to present from there?
Is this okay, Mr. Chairman?
It is perfectly fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of House Appropriations. Thank you for your consideration. So this is a bill that updates the building materials that are recognized for our columbariums. And I had to Google this. This is a constituent bill brought to me by our local cemetery managers, recognizing that our laws around columbariums, so that's when somebody decides to be cremated and wishes to have their vessel stored in a building within a cemetery. What we found is this law was written maybe in the 60s and hasn't been updated since to reflect modern building technology and materials. So on page 2 of the bill, lines 15 through 21, you'll see that we are updating the language, still maintaining structural soundness, and the materials still have to withstand exterior weathering, but we are allowing for the use beyond just granite and marble to include slate, sandstone, limestone, concrete block masonry, or any other material of similar properties that achieve structural integrity. So that sort of broad range language means that hopefully in 10 years, when there's a new material, we don't have to come back to this bill and update it again. If you'll turn to page 3, it updates the materials that can be used for exterior doors to that columbarium and the interior construction of the columbarium. So this will give some modernization to the statute. It will allow our cemeteries in 2 of our communities who are working on these now to utilize current construction materials and still come in compliance with the Department of Health, who regulates our cemeteries. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Questions for the bringer? I have a question for the bringer of the bill. Representative Sherwood, on this page 3, I find it interesting that there are doors made of granite and marble and slate and sandstone and limestone. How was that come about for doors?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So currently, the exterior doors can only utilize bronze or similar aluminum alloy. And so again, this was a request of the constituent to allow for flexibility in those and broadening of those materials that could be used. And again, so now we have a list for folks to choose from.
Does anybody know of any doors that are made of limestone? I hate to put it into statute if it's something that's odd. Go ahead, Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Correct me if I'm wrong, but is the dark portion already in statute and we're just adding the red? Therefore, it's already there.
Representative Pendergraft, you're almost right. The line 2 is the added language, which is underlined. And so exterior doors shall be constructed of, and then the new language, granite, marble, slate, sandstone, or limestone. And then we have the old language of bronze or aluminum alloys. So they were trying to make it very weatherproof to protect the urns, I believe. So I'm just curious if anybody's ever seen a door made out of stone like this. Go ahead, Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and just kind of add a little bit to this, and then at the end I'll have a question. Yes, I have actually. They've carved them out, and they're like a vault door. So this is when they actually will seal the urns in at the end. Or if actually, interestingly enough, if you travel down on Pershing, you'll actually see it's not exactly for urns, but it's a vault and it's fully stone. which is something that, I mean, it's interesting. But the question I have for the bringer is, as we've looked across the board, I mean, obviously, I'm sure there's standards throughout other states, and what are they saying? I mean, is this aligning more with other states and saying, hey, we've just kind of been in the dark, or are we actually sitting there going, hey, we're kind of treading into new waters here?
Thank you. That is a great question, because that's where I started. I was like, all right, how do other states deal with this? Worst case scenario, the Sunshine State, the state with all the palm trees on the coast, their statute on this is 27 pages long, and it is insanely prescriptive, like down to the materials that the hinges are. And I didn't want to go that direction. Really, the purpose of this, to me, should be, is it structurally sound and is it weatherproof? And are we offering the flexibility for people then in our communities to use materials that meet those qualifications? So this is a much simpler approach than other states have.
Representative Smith.
Could you make a motion to have a friendly amendment of exactly what you just said, made out of materials that are weatherproof and, what was the other word you just said? Structurally sound. And then that would keep it more indefinite, and if new technology comes along or they want to use a different material, that might be even more beneficial.
So is that a motion? Representative Smith.
Motion.
Seconded?
And Mr. Chairman, for clarification, do we want to apply that simple language to both the exterior walls and roof, which is on page 2, line 15, to the exterior doors on page 3, line 1, and the interiors on page 3, line 6? Just for clarification, do we want to clean that up on all 3 of those sections?
Representative Smith.
I would take that as a friendly motion to the non-seconded motion.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table. Any seconds? Okay, any discussion on the motion? I'm going to make a comment here. I think this more prescriptive language is probably appropriate for what this purpose is, and that's why the Sunshine State had 27 pages, because there's probably been times in the past when these columbariums have been destroyed by the weather because they were left unattended, and remains were, what's the word I'm looking for?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Representative Angelos.
So on page 2, the end of line 19 through 21, it says designed to be structurally sound and to withstand exterior weathering. Do we just want to extend that same line to portion V and VI? That might clear up the language. I can read that if you
We've
like.
got a motion on the table first. Let's dispatch with that. So if you want to bring that as a motion later, you can, but is there any further discussion on the motion? Representative Alaman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Who interprets if it's structurally sound? I like the wording as in the bill, because two engineers may not agree with structurally sound. I just like the wording as it is. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Representative Smith.
I would withdraw my motion because I'm also thinking back to a lot of our state buildings that are made with concrete. You would think that would be structurally sound, but here we are 50 years later, and the type of concrete was not good enough. So, so I will withdraw my amendment and leave the language as is.
Amendment withdrawn. All right. Any further discussion? Any motions on the bill? What's the committee's pleasure? Well, first of all, is there any public comment on the bill? No public comment. I'll close public comment. Any discussion on the bill? Any motions? Move to pass. Seconded by Representative Smith. Let's quickly walk through the bill one more time, just to make sure there's no other additions or subtractions. Page 1, page 2, page 3, Okay. No further discussion, closing discussion on the bill. Ms. Childress, would you please take the roll on House Bill 103?
Roll call vote on House Bill 103 do pass. Representative Alaman?
Aye.
Representative Angelos?
Aye.
Representative Haroldson?
Aye.
Representative Pendergraft?
Aye.
Representative Sherwood?
Aye.
Representative Smith?
Aye.
Chairman Bear?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, 7 aye.
Thank you, Ms. Childress. Okay, next bill for our consideration is House Bill 173. 173. It looks like this is Representative Haroldson's bill. Independent candidate requirements. Representative Harroldson. Actually, let me say Speaker Pro Tem Harroldson. I'm going to keep working on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before you today is Independent Candidate Requirements, House Bill 173. And what this bill does is it addresses the petition for independent candidate requirements as well as the timetable for that. So if you look at page 1, line 11 and 12, you're seeing that we're amending 22-5301A, 22-5304, as well as 22-5307, and they are amended to read as such, and we're going to look into that. So page 2, First Amendment's on line 16, is just a cleanup of what an unaffiliated voter is. It's someone who is otherwise not registered in a major political party. So someone who's unregistered, unaffiliated. That was just something that they asked for a cleanup because they're like, well, it isn't 100% clear what an unaffiliated voter is. And then you skip to, it would be page 5 is the next real changes. And it goes from a 2% to a 5% number of votes cast for the petition amount. And how they take that is, and if, I guess I'm gonna have you guys jump ahead real quick to page 6, line 8 and 9, and then we'll jump back. But it says, what is this? It's vote cast for the particular office in the last general election. So if it's a situation where we had an unaffiliated candidate wanting to run for, say, a House district, they would take that House district's votes in the last general election, and that would be what would come forward as the number for that petition, going from 2 to 5. And some people have asked, why that? Well, when we're looking at numbers, it's not uncommon that we'll see in a general election for, say, a House district, we could be as low as under 1,000 votes for a House district in a general election, especially if the predominant, I guess, running it for that is in a primary. So 2% is incredibly low at that point. So the 5% just raises the bar a little bit and has the conversation. So really the 2 to 5%'s the one policy decision we have to make. And the second policy decision is on page 6, line 15. Actually, it's 13 through 16, and I'll read it. Petition filed with the Secretary of State with the county clerk shall be filed not less than, and then we strike 70 days and we add 81 days, and then we add before the date of the primary election in the applicable general election year. And so what this does is it shifts the conversation to 81 days before that general election, which puts it before the primary election. So what we have going on here, and kind of the main policy decision, is these independent candidates have to decide to run and make that decision before the primary has been decided. And why this is important is because we've seen in the past across the state where if someone wins a primary and then all of a sudden an independent shows up that next week or over the next 2 weeks to run against them. And this would eliminate that, where if someone really feels like they need to be running for this position as an independent candidate, they have the opportunity to do so, but they have to do it before that primary has taken place. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd stand for any questions.
Okay, any questions for the bringer? Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you kind of talk us through like pros, cons of using say like 2% of those who voted in the general versus saying like 5% of those who voted in the primary? And I guess, yeah, what problem are we trying to solve by adjusting the percentage? Thank you.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. I'm just pulling up my calculator real quick.
Representative Haroldson?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
I'm going to interject here for just a second. The stricken language on page 6 isn't talking about votes cast, as is the new language is. I just want to point out that the 2% that was in the language before is based on the number of registered voters at a particular point in time. So there's a difference there, registered voters versus votes cast. Just want to point that out. So Representative Harrelson, if you could go ahead and continue with your description for Representative Sherwood's question.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there was one of the cases that I looked at was it was a general election where 730 change votes were cast in a general election. 2% of that's 14.6. So 14 people. I come from a big enough family I could get the petition signed at Sunday afternoon dinner. I mean, because if all my family shows up, we got a pretty good pile of people that show up. And so adding that 5% it doesn't make it anything incredibly huge, but it brings it up to 36 people. So it just adds a little bit more where if you really feel like you want to go and be an unaffiliated candidate, you have to go and knock on some doors, have this conversation and see, do I have the support to make this a reality as an unaffiliated? And so it creates a little bit more of a where this decision has to be made by a larger group of people to put an independent into the general election.
Okay, I have a question then, based on that. Did you do the math for the registered voters versus the votes cast, and did it make a difference? And follow up to that, I'd like to know if this 81 days, does that correlate with something else in election law that we're not seeing here in this bill? If you can answer those two, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the registered voter numbers are much higher. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to get back to those that are actively involved in that election process. So it actually, 2% is, the 5%, 2% change actually is a change there, but it actually, in some ways, might even be an easier ask in some districts on this 5% vote cast. And as far as the 81 days, it just brings our timetable back into the filing period.
Follow up, would that be the beginning of the filing period, end of the filing period? I assume it'd be the end of the filing period.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, end of the filing period.
Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure I'm clear here. So on page 5, lines 6 through 11 talk about statewide office. And the existing language in statute is referencing the total number of votes cast. So in this just statewide office, we're going from 2% to 5% of the total number of votes cast. Okay, and then page 5, lines 13 through 18, we're talking about county-wide offices. And the existing language is the total number of votes cast going from 2 to 5%. Page 5, starting on line 20, now we talk about a district partisan election. On to page 6, I agree that then adding language on lines 8 and 9, clarifying it should be number of votes cast, seems appropriate because it brings it in line with what is current practice with statewide, countywide, and now we're saying district has to have that same standards of number of votes cast.
Correct.
Okay, so my concern though is taking it for statewide office from 2% of the number of votes cast to 5% of the number of votes cast does create a hardship for an independent candidate to then get on the ballot, as opposed to leaving it at 2% of votes cast consistently for every office, statewide, countywide, or district-wide.
Go ahead, Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So 2 to 5 on an entire statewide elected race is definitely going to raise those numbers exponentially. But I also will say, we just got to see a people's petition with 40,000 votes get signed and brought through. I believe that if you can bring forward a campaign that's going to bring viability to the state, then there's gonna have to be a backing around you to make that reality, and it's something that should not be done just on a whim. This should be a decision you make for running for those top 5s as an independent candidate. And so I do believe that the 5% isn't out of line. I think that it would definitely bring together a team, and they would have to do their due diligence and work to bring their platform forward in a way that the people want to be involved with that and do that in that petition signing.
Representative Sherwood?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the conversation. So running for office is hard regardless, right? And yeah, you have to absolutely have a team of people around you to support you. So I just want to share some numbers. In terms of, in 2024, those who voted in the general election, 2% of that, thinking about the number of signatures, would be 5,420. So that's a lift, right? At 5%, that's 13,550. Just so we all know, eyes wide open. That's the change that we're asking for with our independent candidates. Thank you.
And I would also point out, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Rubino, but the line you have to get across for a ballot initiative is much higher. I think it's 15%. Is that correct, Mr. Rubino? Okay, so 15% was done recently, but I think it's maybe one of only one. It's probably the only time it's been accomplished in the state. Has it been done before?
This level, 1994 was the last.
Yep, you got to be at the mic.
Mr. Chairman, you need to go to the mic. Whoever was speaking.
We're not quite ready for public comment, so I will call the mic. Sorry, I shouldn't have done that. I was calling for a lifeline there. I have some reservations about this 5%, especially statewide, and I do like the idea of putting the language, making it consistent at all levels. But when I think about changing the timeframe back to the same timeframe that everybody else has to register, I like that. I think that's appropriate. But I'm concerned about the volume of votes or signatures that are going to be required, especially at the state level. I don't think we need to handicap an independent candidate any more than necessary. They're already handicapped being independent. That's my comments on the bill. Any further comments on the bill? Okay, we'll open it up for public comment. We'll have the Secretary of State come.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great to be here in House Appropriations. I'm Chuck Gray, the Wyoming Secretary of State, and to my right is Joe Rubino, our Policy Director and Counsel. I'm in complete and total support of this bill. Essentially, this bill changes, well, just to back up a second, we have seen with independent candidates a lot of interesting situations that I don't think are getting to the true intent of the statute. And this is hoping to clean up a lot of those situations that our state has faced. And it essentially changes three things. One, the oath required of an independent candidate seeking nomination by petition, the threshold number of signature requirements, and the time for filing independent candidate petitions. First, the bill clarifies something we've received a lot of feedback on, and that is clarification that to run as an independent, you should indeed be registered unaffiliated, rather than be affiliated with a political party. Right now, that is not the way the statute reads. And we could get really into it, and we've analyzed it so many times, and my predecessors had the same position. And while from a policy perspective, that's probably not where we'd like to go, that's the way it reads right now. And we believe that truly that you should need to be unaffiliated to be an independent candidate. Second, the bill increases the threshold number of signatures required from 2% of the total number of votes cast for an office to 5%, which is well in line with many other states. In speaking with many around the state, it's troubling that 60, 70, 80 signatures, an individual after the primary, the way the timing is set out in state law, somebody gets 60, 70, 80 signatures and suddenly there's an independent candidate. And I think that threshold really needs to be put in alignment with other states. While we do have a sore loser law, which is currently being adjudicated in the Supreme Court, there are still concerns that someone else can simply watch a race unfold and then, depending on the outcome of the primary, jump in, which is not sound policy. And that gets to the third reform in this bill. The bill changes the filing deadline to align with the deadline to file an application for nomination as a major party candidate. And I think they should all be in alignment. And we shouldn't have this sort of gamesmanship where the primary happens and then someone can put forward an independent candidacy when party-affiliated candidates had to file 3 months earlier. And I just don't think that is sound policy, and I think we need to be consistent. And I actually think of the three reforms, it's probably the most important, although I think all of them are important. So, thank you.
Any
Complete
questions or
total
comments
support.
for the Secretary of State? I have one.
Yes.
Mr. Secretary, you may have heard my comments when you came in.
Yeah.
And I do agree with you that there is a need to address this issue. And I do believe that the bringer of the bill's motion to, or his line change here to 81 days before the primary certainly makes it more difficult to do what you described, where someone changes to be an independent after the primary. That pretty much eliminates that potential with this statute. My question to you is, is this a hurdle too far, going from 2% to 5%? I do agree with you that we want to make it consistent across the different levels of election. But when it does come to a statewide election, that's a significant number of signatures. And as I stated before, we already have, it's already an uphill battle for an independent candidate. Do we need to make it any more difficult to get on the ballot? You mentioned that there were, the majority of the states, I believe was your comment, have this 5% threshold. Can you give me an idea of how many states have that threshold?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Rubino, do you have some of those stats? I think we can provide some of those.
Yep, Mr. Chairman, happy to provide those. I was actually looking at a National Conference of State Legislatures breakdown of that. It is dependent on the state. Some of them have a flat signature number, so it's like a threshold, 500, 1,000, 1,500 for a legislative district. Others, it's 5%, ranging from, I'd say, 2% to, I've seen as high as, I think, 5 or 7%.
And Mr. Chairman, I do think the one that is the most in need of reform is the district level. It's just too low at 2% in terms of raw number, because it's usually 60 to 80 signatures. So I understand that maybe you're saying that you would just do it for district, just change the district threshold, not the state. I'm supportive of changing it all. I understand your comments. I will say, I think Mr. Rubino was saying that there's not been one since 1994 when I walked in. RFK was had hit it. He withdrew though before, literally one day before we had to send the nomination over to the clerks. So he had hit it.
And just to clarify, what they were talking about, and we apologize, we are noticed in 3 different committees at once, so we're kind of all running around. But you were talking about not a petition for an independent candidate, a petition for a ballot initiative, which is
Correct.
15%.
Right.
That last one was.
Right. Okay. Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm trying to consider if I'm a candidate and I want to run for statewide office, what it means to get to that 5% threshold, how prepared I'm going to have to be, do I have an organization, and those things. And I'm thinking about that, and I'm also thinking about this interest in keeping it consistent through all the different levels. And I'd just like you to elaborate on why you feel that it's important to have the same threshold for a statewide office as it is for a local office.
Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think you have to. I think uniformity is good on it. I also think you could maybe do something between 2 and 5 for statewides. I think 2 is, I hear where you're coming from on 5 on statewides, but I think 2 is definitely too low, in my opinion. I don't think 5 would be outrageous in any respect.
Mr. Secretary, it was mentioned before you got here that it was, I believe, about 5,000 signatures on a statewide at 2%, and that jumped to 13,000. But when it was the ballot initiative, I know it's not apples to apples, but it's signatures, so that required, I think, something around 40,000 signatures, and it took nearly 2 years to accomplish that. So just to try to put it in perspective for the committee here, does that number sound accurate, 13,000 for a statewide for 5%?
Yeah, that does sound accurate, yeah.
Okay.
Yep, that does sound correct.
Okay. Any further
Those are
questions?
Representative Sherwood's numbers, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide a written breakdown too. I don't have that in front of me right now, but.
Okay, we'll go with those numbers for now. Thank you. Any further questions for the secretary? All right, we thank you for being here.
Thanks, thank you.
Any questions from the public or comments? Sorry. Mr. Bray, thank you for being here. Welcome to Appropriations.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. There's one wording change in the first change. It reads majority party, member of a majority party. We do have minority parties in Wyoming, not many anymore, but we do have those, and there are different rules for how they select their nominees that might need to be addressed because they aren't independent or unaffiliated candidates. They are members of parties. I believe, Mr. Chairman, that requiring the higher threshold, the 5% threshold, actually is a benefit to the candidates because the campaigns are hard. There's a lot of work that goes into them. And a candidate who just gets a dozen or so signatures around the dinner table hasn't prepared themselves to campaign. But if you have to get a few of your neighbors involved as well, then you've gotten a taste of it and you're more prepared to campaign. And if you can't get 13,000 signatures across the state, there's probably not a very good chance that you're going to be able to win a gubernatorial race. And I'll stand for questions if you have any.
Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, I did not catch your name.
Troy Bray.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Bray, for coming. And so as I'm reading on that page 2, line 18, it says a major political party?
Right.
So you're saying you believe maybe we need to have an addressing to a minor political, so this, I
Change-
Through the chair, please.
Mr. Chairman, change it to the wording to major or minor party. Just the little addition of addressing a minor party as well.
Okay. Any further questions for Mr. Bray? All right. Thank you, Mr. Bray. Appreciate your comments. Welcome to Appropriations. Please state your name and who you represent.
Thank you. My name is Jenny DeSaro. I work with the Equality State Policy Center, and to my left is Marissa Carpio, who is the Policy Center's Policy Director. We oppose this bill because it restricts independent thinking and nonpartisan participation in running for public office. This bill creates unnecessary hurdles for individuals seeking to participate in our democratic process. The nature of being an independent or unaffiliated candidate is that you do not have the backing of a party to support your participation. This already places the individual at a disadvantage, and now this bill would further restrict this individual. All of you sit up here with a party, a major party backing. And imagine what it was like when you were running for office and all the energy that had to go into that. And this individual, this individual has to do this by themselves. They have to come up with their own committee, and they don't have the consult of a party. We do a nonpartisan candidate training, and many of the folks who attend the training are just thinking whether they want to run for office. We've had conversations with the clerk's office, and the significant days that people file for their candidacy when they are with a party are the first day and the last day. So, like, people need time to make a decision, and they're looking to see who's running. Our offices do we even have candidates for offices? Like, there are often times when there isn't even a candidate. So we strongly encourage that we keep it open for that kind of participation. Wyoming should be encouraging more participation from an array of viewpoints, not deterring independent ideas and nonpartisan candidates. These candidates I already said that part. George Washington, the first and 2 times US president, is the only independent candidate to date to win the US presidency with massive votes. Washington feared that partisanship would eventually destroy the country and famously warned against this in his 1796 farewell address. Quote, "Let me now take a more comprehensive view and warn you in the most solemn manner against the baneful effects of the spirit of party generality." And with that, I will stand for questions, and also if my partner would like to add anything.
Any questions for Mr. Tesoro? Okay. Ma'am, would you like to make a comment? Please state your name and who you represent.
Yeah, of course, thank you. My name is Marissa Carpio, I'm the Policy Director for the Equality State Policy Center. I just had a couple things to add that I just took notes on while everybody was talking. The first would be the date, 81 days before the last primary election, which was August 20th, 2024, would be May 31st, 2024. That's the last day of candidate filing, so there's still candidates filing for that primary election, and then you're forcing independent candidates who will only be on the general election to file at that same time. As my executive director said, a lot of people wait until that last day to file. So I have a slight concern with that, if we could push that date just a little bit forward so that independent candidates can see the full slate of candidates going up against them in the general. The other thing is the oath. Independents come in all shapes and sizes, whether they decide to affiliate at any time or not, whether they affiliate one time and then switch back to unaffiliated to vote for a Republican friend in the county coroner position, they're still independents. And then the last, just about the percentage, for the ballot initiative, it is 15% of 2/3 of all counties. So not 15% of the state, and they also have 18 months to collect those signatures. So a little bit different than 81 days as well. And then I did also look at the NCSL brief on all of the states and what they have in terms of independent candidate signature requirements. And I just pulled a couple. Arkansas uses 3% of registered voters. Colorado uses 5% of the votes cast in the last general election. Florida uses 1% of registered voters, and Alabama uses 3% of total votes cast in the last gubernatorial election. So while 21% of states use percentages, it varies widely. So I just wanted to provide some of those notes that I took, and thank you so much for speaking about this and giving us time to speak as well.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Go ahead, Representative Smith.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Quick question. Do you have any statistics on how many independents regularly go back and forth between different parties to vote for said coroner or other friends that are running?
Go ahead, Ms. Carpio.
Thank you, Chairman Barron, Representative Smith. I do not have those statistics on me, but I do know someone who has them. So I will pull them and send them to you all if that would be helpful.
Any further questions?
May I follow up on that?
Go ahead, Ms. Desaro.
Desaro, thank you. The other thing to consider is that sometimes a person could be affiliated with a party and in protest, which would be a form of speech, could decide that they want to run as an unaffiliated candidate. So I do think that it does create a little infringement on a person's right to voice and speak out if they disagree with their party by causing these deadlines and having all of these restrict a person's flexibility.
Ms. Desario, I have a question, and either of you can answer this. You know, we have in the primary election, which we're moving with this bill, the date back to register at the same time as the other candidates for the primary election. And, you know, that's the time you register to run for precinct person in one of these parties. So, you know, this, I assume, based on this attestation, would preclude you really running for a party position because you've attested that you're an independent and unaffiliated at the same time. Tell me your thoughts about that. So you'd be running as an independent candidate in an election. At the same time, you're also running as a candidate for a party in an election.
Mr. Chairman, I do believe that if someone was decided that they were going to run for a independent position or run as an independent, they would not run for a precinct committee person. And the precinct committee, like, you would have to have that filed by the May date. So how it is now, the dates are a little fuzzy, but an independent can file after that date. And so they would have most likely already decided not to run for a party, a precinct committee person, because there's probably, I would love to look into that and see if we have any examples.
I think I've actually seen that where, you know, they lost an election running as a candidate in a major party. They were also running as a precinct person, won the precinct election, lost the primary, and then ran as an independent in the general election. I think that's one of the things that this is addressing, because we have a sore loser law, but it's difficult to stay within the lines of that law.
So I would ask, Mr. Chairman, did that person win?
No, I have stated before that, you know, it's an uphill battle for an independent.
Yeah, we've only, so, Mr. Chairman, in the last, is it 10 years? I think was the stat. Sorry, I'd have to look at, I didn't have it pulled up. We've only had 2 non-major party folks serve in our state legislature.
Okay.
It's pretty rare and really already really tough so are we really, I guess I'm wondering what we're trying to solve, because are we that afraid of independent thinking that if an independent or an unaffiliated decides to run, that the major party already has, the 2 major parties already have a lot of oomph behind them? I'm not sure that I see the problem, because if they run, they're making a statement, and again, it's a freedom of speech to kind of protest that way by running for office, I guess is one way to look at it.
Okay. Any further questions? All right. Thank you for being here.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thank you
your
very
testimony.
much.
Any further public comment? Ms. Childress, do we have anyone online? Okay, no one online, so we're going to close public comment. And what's the committee's pleasure? Move the bill. All right, seconded. All right. Any motions on this bill? Go ahead, Representative Pendergraft.
I would move to amend page 1, line 3. After the word major, add the words or minor, and continue.
Okay, you've all heard the amendment. Any seconds? Seconded by Representative Angelos. Any comments? Any questions on the discussion on the amendment? Go ahead, Representative Pendergraft.
This whole bill and the situation that it brings up fascinates me, and I guess my goal would be to pair out those who are not necessarily serious about running, but about muddying the waters. And by broadening the political parties to the minor parties, I actually think you strengthen the political process that we have. I guess what I'm saying is pick a side and go.
Okay. Any further discussion on the amendment? Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as a clarifier, so that was page 1, line 3, and also on page 2, line 18.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Representative Pendergraft.
I would agree as a friendly amendment.
Okay, so we're just going to combine those. It's just an adjustment to the original amendment. Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment Representative Pendergraft brought, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, that carries. Any questions, Ms. Childress, with that amendment? Got it? Okay. All right, going on, page 2. Any motions? Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Representative Pendergraft.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I kind of want to test the temperature of the committee. I would propose to amend on page 5, line 9, remove the word 5 and replace it with 3 and 3%.
Do I have a second? Second by Angelos. Any discussion? Okay, you've heard, go ahead, Representative Alman.
I just have, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a quick comment. In our National Congress Ladies Run, there was 184,631 votes cast. At 5%, it would be 12,998 would be needed. At 2%, it would be 5,199. I just brought that as information. Thank you.
Representative Alman, I appreciate your attestation of Representative Sherwood's good math. Go ahead, Representative Sherwood.
Thank you. I also am interested in testing the waters here, and would it be considered a friendly amendment to then also on line 5, or sorry, page 5, line 16, change the countywide to 3% for consistency? Or is the intent to kind of call out these percentages different depending on the statewide versus countywide?
Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would not consider it a friendly amendment. I am looking at the bar that you'd have to get over in each of these, and I'm not particularly concerned with having them all consistent, but I want to get it high enough that you have to actually be serious enough to get a statewide organization. Thank you.
Okay, do I have a second on this amendment, even though it's not friendly? I'm going to second it, okay? I think that the Secretary of State said he'd like to see consistency in this. I think that's what the bringer of the bill's intent was. There is an argument to say that those district levels, those numbers are too small, but when you go to countywide, I think it's, again, a pretty big hurdle. And I also think that if we stick with an 81-day date, we're going to have good candidates for these independent candidates. They're going to be people who don't want to run as a as a major or minor party candidate. So we're sifting out those people that I think Representative Pendergraft mentioned earlier. So I think that the 3% for both the statewide and the countywide is an appropriate thing. So any further discussion on the amendment to the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment to the amendment, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Okay, that carries. Back on the amendment. Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment that Pendergraft brought, say aye. 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 Those opposed? All right, that carries. Ms. Childers, any questions about the amendment?
So, Mr. Chairman, it is just on page 5, line 9, line 16, changing both from 5% to 3%.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, moving on, page 6. Representative Harrelson.
Just to clarify, not on line 23.
That is correct.
So it's just the two.
Yeah, so your comments about the district, you could get those signatures at the kitchen table.
Yep.
We're moving that up to 5%.
And the other two at 3.
Yep. And also, yeah, on the
That
back
wasn't
of
what-
page 6 remains at 5%. Go ahead, Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So another math. So in my district, House District 14, at 2%, that would be 95 signatures. My kitchen table's not that big. And then at 5%, it would be 238 signatures.
I must say that the participation in that heavily, well, I won't say that, I won't say your party, but I'm impressed with the participation in your district, though. Go ahead, Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would definitely want to keep the districts at 5, just partly because geographically, it's much simpler to go out door to door in a small area, and as opposed to when you get to the county or you get to the state. So I like the 5.
Okay. Do I have any motions on page, we're on page 6. Do I have any motions? Okay. All right, that is the bill. Any further discussion on the bill itself? Representative? Nope. Okay, move to pass. Ms. Childers, would you please take the roll?
Roll call vote for House Bill 173, do pass with amendments. Representative Alleman? Aye. Representative Angelos? Aye. Representative Harrelson?
Aye.
Representative Pendergraft?
Aye.
Representative Sherwood?
No.
Representative Smith?
Aye.
Chairman Bear?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, 6 aye, 1 no.
Thank you, Ms. Childers. Now we're moving on to House Bill 276. I gotta find my notes. I'm gonna go ahead and present this bill on behalf of the bringer. I can find my note. Oh, here we go. Okay, committee, this is House Bill 276, and this bill has to do with enforcing immigration law, federal law, at the county level. And currently, there is inconsistency across the state. Some counties do work with the federal government on immigration law, and some do not. And what this leads to is inconsistency for our population not understanding the law, not understanding what they should anticipate. And the current administration has made a major effort to turn things around as far as the direction the country's been going on basically an open border policy. This is an effort to try to assist with that. And there is a funding issue, whereas these agreements that are discussed in this bill will allow for federal funding for our local law enforcement agencies when they're getting involved with these agreements and working with the federal government on this particular issue. So with that, I'll walk you through the bill. On page 2, you'll see on line 2 that it has a shall negotiate. So we are requiring that our county sheriffs negotiate with the United States Attorney General or the Department of Justice to work out an agreement for detaining and assisting in enforcement of these federal laws. You can see again on page 2, line 12, that there's a date set and then a report to the Wyoming Attorney General about an effort made to come to an agreement. Then you move down to line 20. If you have the Attorney General decline to enter into an agreement with the county, you have the report indicating what the reasons for that were. On page 3, also in the report, we're talking about exactly what kind of cooperation the United States Attorney General tried to make in this agreement. And then down on line 6, we have no later than the 1st of November of each November thereafter, the Attorney General of this state shall report to the Joint Judiciary Interim Committee on the information each county sheriff communicated to the Wyoming Attorney General. And on line 12, you see that if a county that fails to enter into an agreement or an attempt to make an agreement, they shall not be eligible to receive any state-administered federal funds associated with law enforcement and law enforcement training. And so then at the bottom of page 3, we have those purposes for not being subject to this subsection. And that is the reporting. If you have reported that you've attempted and were unsuccessful, you won't be held accountable to the federal funding issue. And then on page 4, you can see that this bill would go into effect immediately if passed. Are there any questions on the bill? Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for walking us through that. I guess these are some high-level questions, and maybe we don't have everybody in the room who can help us answer them at this moment. Do we feel that this bill gives our law enforcement a disadvantage in negotiations? Because we're saying you shall enter into negotiations. If there's something they're uncomfortable with, is there some concern that they won't be able to fully leverage a strategy to negotiate what's in the best interest of the Wyoming people? That's sort of on my mind as a concern. The other questions I have are, who decides if negotiations were entered into or conducted in good faith? Right? So if we have somebody on the other side of the table representing the federal government that, sort of pulling some unfair punches, how do we protect our law enforcement officers from having to agree to something that isn't fair or in good faith? So like who is the arbitrator of that? And then on page 3, it talks about, being not eligible to receive any state administered federal funds, but we don't really call out in here like who enforces that, who withholds the money, who decides when they come back into compliance and that money can be released. So I'm just kind of fuzzy on like, who is the sort of judge and jury over this process? And then maybe we can flesh out some of those things. Thank you.
As the bringer of the bill, I'll go ahead and answer that question to the best of my ability. So the answer to your last portion of your question would be the Wyoming State Attorney General. That would be the arbiter. As to creating a situation where good faith negotiations can't be accomplished, I think that most of these negotiations are over boilerplate agreements, and so it would be inconsistent to think that you needed to have that ability to make wide-ranging changes. Okay. Representative Alaman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 3, line 18, it says a county that has reported to the Wyoming Attorney General that the United States Attorney General has declined to enter into an agreement under 8 U.S.C. 1357G shall not be subject to this subsection. So if the United States does not cooperate, our sheriff's all right. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, what's the committee's pleasure?
Chairman. I too have a lot of questions, but I see some folks out there that I would like to hear from.
Okay, we'll open up public
I would
comment.
like to hear from anybody that has anything to bring.
Okay. Please state your name and your affiliation, and whether you're in support or opposed to the bill. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. My name is Alan Thompson. I'm the Executive Director of WASCOP, which is the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police. This has been a flurry of conversations and meetings. We had been planning for this to be in committee on Monday, and we had some sheriffs that were preparing to testify. We found out late that it was going to be scheduled for today, so we had a meeting just before just before lunch today with 19 of our sheriffs at one point on the call, and the vast message is that there's serious concerns with the implications of this bill should it be passed. So my apologies for the sheriffs not being here today. It was just too late of a notice for them, but there's been a lot of discussion in this session about how law enforcement can best tackle immigration, the problem that we face not only across the nation, but in Wyoming also. And I want to make sure that the committee knows that the sheriffs have been on the front lines of this fight for the past 4 years, coordinating with the Western State Sheriff's Association, the National Sheriff's Association. Our sheriffs have sent personnel to the border and continue to work within the law to notify ICE when we encounter illegal immigrants. We also know that negotiations are underway in many counties across Wyoming to develop and expand ICE agreements. So they're both developing and expanding the existing ones. And we feel like opportunities could be forthcoming for more jails to work as hubs and diminish the impact and delays that some of our smaller sheriff's offices are facing right now, which would in turn alleviate the need for that smaller sheriff's office to even negotiate for a contract. And at the same time, we've been, we've resisted contracts and agreements with the federal government on a general scale. We see bills each year, including this year, that prohibit and even attach criminal and civil penalties for working with the federal government. As a result, we have some hesitancy to what the requirements of this bill might bring to us. According to the ICE website, only 77 sheriff's offices out of the 3,083 in the United States currently have agreements with ICE. There is a reason for that, and it's not because we somehow support illegal immigration. These agreements cost time and money, and most importantly, they incur manpower commitments that many agencies just cannot incur, both through training requirements up to 6 weeks, dependent upon the agreement, and so forth. Also, there's no guarantee for financial support. Now, that financial component is usually not the biggest problem, the hurdle, but we see decreasing budgets on the horizon and no reduction of responsibilities in the communities served by sheriffs. The sheriffs wholeheartedly support the message of this bill, but have serious concerns about the ability to provide yet another enhanced service by entering into these contracts. Maybe the most important message that we would like the committee to hear is that if this bill passes, we're sending a message to ICE that they hold all the cards in negotiations, and they have no incentive to listen to what we have to offer and have to say. And especially, this could be especially harmful to the sheriffs that are actually in negotiations right now to expand or to start. And I would just like to add, Mr. Chairman, that we've seen tremendous movement in the last 3 days on the national level. And it's happening so fast that we can't even keep up with it in Wyoming. We don't know what the next step is going to be, but we would sure love a little bit of time to see what that next step is going to be and how much we can participate in that willingly and provide all the help that we can to the administration to deal with this issue. And Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of amendments, suggested amendments for the bill should it be decided to be moved today. But keep in mind that we were just discussing this as a group, so it's not very polished. And basically what we're asking for is consideration, like maybe on page 2 would be line 10, after the demands of the written agreement, maybe consideration, at least for the next year, to put in lieu of that agreement, require sheriffs to document and report all illegal aliens detained in the county jail and report such persons to ICE and the Wyoming Attorney General in a timely manner. And there would be kind of a need for some conforming language. I'd be happy to try and polish that up and provide written.
Mr. Thompson?
I'm sorry,
If you have that in electronic form, could, when you finish with your testimony, I'll probably just have you get with Ms. Childress here and just email to her what you have, if that's an electronic form, and then we'll let her take your language and put it in the form if we move on that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
So go on with the potential amendments.
Mr. Chairman, would it be all right for me to speak with her about that because it's not polished? I feel like there's some language
Well,
I
I
could
think-
add to it.
I think we got the idea on this one,
Okay.
where in lieu of the agreement, you would have a report of the number of illegal aliens that have been arrested, and also those that have been turned over to ICE. I guess, do you have also in there that those that were not turned over to ICE, that were released without being remanded to ICE? That be in the report?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that would be our intent.
Okay.
That we report all and then the disposition of all.
Are there other amendments that you'd like to see on this bill?
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, just, I think it's more like conforming language. I guess it's on page 3, line 12. Starts with a county that fails to enter or fails to, I would recommend striking the attempt to enter into agreement and replace that with the language reporting to ICE and the Attorney General as required in subsection A.
In lieu of?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I didn't hear you.
So again, you'd use that in lieu of language. In lieu of making an agreement, they would report.
Correct,
That's
Mr.
the
Chairman, thank
language.
you.
So we'd have the same language in both those parts. Anything else?
And Mr. Chairman, on the last page, the line 1 says the act goes effective immediately. One of the other considerations is delaying that maybe past the next session to see what is actually accomplished for the implementation of this. But, you know, we'd be happy to provide or look at the collection of data in that time too. But I think most importantly is, Mr. Chairman, we know that administrations change. And if I've ever seen a bill that would need a sunset date, we would recommend that a sunset date of January 1, 2029 would be something that, I don't know where that goes in the bill, Mr. Chairman, but something that could be added on to the end.
Okay. All right. Any
And
questions for Mr. Thompson? Representative Pendergraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a couple of questions. I'm thinking about Wyoming, for example, and having lived all over it, I know that many counties are different, would have a different attitude within the people of that county. Leading to that, there is also a popular notion out there that the sheriff is the highest official in the county. Would you please elaborate on the truth or fallacy in that statement?
Mr. Thompson?
Mr. Chairman, I have heard that terminology before, and I've also heard that terminology applied to the county attorney who makes the ultimate decision in charging. So while that is true, there seems to be constitutional issues with immigration enforcement and violating immigration law. And historically, some of the timeframes especially associated with holding someone post their adjudication of the local charges and simply holding them in jail for the federal government to come get them. We have rules in place in Wyoming for private citizens that can extend past 48 hours or 72, depending on the circumstances, short of a warrant for their arrest. And the paperwork that we usually get from the federal government is not a warrant for their arrest. It's a civil document to hold them for further charges. So there's a lot of confusion on the constitutionality of that, especially for our sheriffs. And the last thing that we want to be doing is ending up in court trying to argue, which we should all be doing or should be able to do with somebody that we know is here illegally.
Follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, going back to the first premise there, that different counties have different political attitudes or different ideas, and blending that with the idea of local control or allowing counties basically to make up their own mind. My question to you would be, how do you feel your organization would feel about an amendment on page 2, line 2, of striking shall and putting may, there may be some counties in my thinking that would be all about trying to gather federal funding. There might be others that would rather be left alone. Would you have any comments on that?
And Mr. Chairman, I think in the end, it still results in the loss of funding that I have no idea how much federal funding each agency is receiving for training and I don't remember the specifics, but some are receiving none, so this would have no impact on them. Some are maybe receiving a lot, but I haven't polled the members, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions for Mr. Thompson? Representative Angelos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Thompson, can you tell me what, I mean, people are in real fear about this, and rightly so. And I want you to state, what is your current practice? What is the law enforcement officer's current practice of keeping track of those who are illegal, who are arrested, put into incarceration, and turned over ICE? Is there a process now?
One moment. I think the point of this bill is that there's differences amongst the counties. The bill was to get the whole state into one uniform way of doing it. But go ahead, Mr. Thompson, if you'd like to add to that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, most often law enforcement is investigating some other incident or has the ability to arrest or charge somebody with a crime. And when that happens, then we're able to investigate whether they're here legally. And that involves communication with ICE generally. I can't think of an instance where it's not. And opportunities for them to use the information that they have to determine whether the person is here illegally or legally. In my personal history with this in the past, based on the level of severity of the charge they're facing on the local level and the ability of ICE to be in the area in a timely manner, determines whether ICE will seek deportation on them. So it's not all the time. So in the past, I know of times where, as a sheriff, we released people that we knew to be here illegally in the United States because there was no further request or hold or ability for ICE to get there in a timely manner. And that is, some version of that is going on across the state of Wyoming right now, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, follow up?
Mr. Chairman, the reason why I did ask that is I just wanted to know if you were already following some type of process of keeping track of these. That's why I asked, but thank you.
Quick follow-up to that. When you're finding out their status, does ICE let you know if they have records that you may not have access to as far as other felonies, other law breaking that individual's done, to where you could make a better determination if it's prudent to let them out or not?
And Mr. Chairman, that determination still rests with ICE. So I don't know of a circumstance where a sheriff could further hold someone once all local charges are disposed of for somebody that will never come and get them. They have to agree to come get them, and we have to hold them until they come get them. So also, Mr. Chairman, I'm not aware of instances where they wouldn't share that information. It might be something that they have in a database that hasn't made it into NCIC yet or whatever. And my experience, ICE has always been willing to share all of that information, which would, in all of my experiences with those, increase their willingness to deport the person.
Okay, all right. Further questions for Mr. Thompson? Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Appreciate you being here. Mr. Ryman, thank you for being here.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jeremiah Riemann here on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. Appreciate the opportunity to address you this afternoon. My members certainly appreciate the sentiment of this bill. They've heard the concerns of their sheriffs, and that has created concerns amongst my members. I am deeply appreciative to the sponsor of this legislation. She reached out to me before she brought it forward and asked for my input. And I did provide the committee a document of a couple of amendments that we would propose to the legislation. And I will just say that Representative Lawley indicated to me that I could tell you that she has no objections to these amendments. Mr. Chairman, the first one really is intended at getting to the point of If the Attorney General, the U.S. Attorney General, has declined to enter into an agreement, that you wouldn't have to go back to them every year and pester them, that you would have sort of a 5-year period before you would have to go back and then come into the reporting phase of this. And the second one is that if you actually have entered into an agreement, so long as that agreement hasn't changed, you wouldn't have to do that annual reporting. So those are a couple of things that I put to her, and she was agreeable to. Certainly willing to work with the committee and Mr. Thompson on the other issues that have been brought forward to see if we can find a good, comfortable place to land this and move it forward.
Okay.
With that, Mr. Chairman, I stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Reeman? Okay, thank you very much for your testimony and appreciate the amendment suggestion. Representative Provenza, would you like to opine on this? All right. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Nope. So, committee, what's your pleasure? Move to pass. Seconded?
Second.
Seconded by Representative Pendergraft. Discussion. Page 1. Page 2. Go ahead, Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to make this motion in the interest of local control and essentially allowing counties to opt out. I understand the intent of the bill, but I'm still going to move this. I would move to strike the word shall on page 2, line 2, and replace it with may.
Do I have a second? Second. Seconded by Representative Sherwood. Any discussion? All those in favor of the amendment say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no?
No.
All right, see your hands. All those in favor of the amendment? All those opposed? Okay, that motion fails. Still on page 2, any further motions? Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So page 2, line 10, it's hard because we don't really have exact language, but the document report conversation that we heard from our chiefs from last COP, if we could get that language moving forward, I think that there is, putting a placeholder in here would be good for that. In both there as well as on page 3, line 12, striking that language and inserting same. And if I could get a nod from ahead that that's the intention.
Mr. Thompson.
Mr. Thompson? Sorry, yes. Okay.
Okay, just to be clear, this is in lieu of the agreement that the agency or the department would report on the number of arrests, incarcerations, turnover to ICE, and releases without turning over to ICE. And they would provide that information rather than an agreement. Okay. Any questions on the amendment? Do I have a second? I'll second. Seconded by Representative Allemand. All right, all those in favor of the Harrelson amendment, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. That carries. Mr. Thompson, if you could please get with Secretary Childress and just give her that language. And Ms. Childress, if you could make sure that the attorneys are good with that language. I'd like to see the amendment before we take it to the floor.
Yes, I will definitely show that to you before I do the standing committee report.
Very good, thank you. Okay, go ahead, Representative Pendergraft.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move the amendments that were brought by the County Commissioners Association. The page 3, line 22 inserts both E and the F as written.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Representative Angelos. Any discussion on the amendment? Go ahead, Representative Smith.
I would like to amend the 5 and change it to 4 because there would be different, potentially federal administrations.
So the motion is to amend the amendment to 4 years. Is that a friendly amendment? Okay. All right. All those in favor of the amendment to the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. That carries. Back on the amendment. Any further discussion on the amendment?
Question?
Question being called. All those in favor of Representative Pendergraft's amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Okay, that carries. Any further discussion on page 3? Page 4. Representative Sherwood.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just considering the testimony we heard and sort of the quick changing nature of our new administration, I would like to, on page 4, line 1, just delay this slightly to July 1st. The act would be, come into law on July 1st.
Okay, you've heard the motion. Do I have a second? Okay, that fails on a second. Any other motions?
I'll try again.
Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Representative Sherwood.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I appreciate it. Also, based on testimony that we heard and understanding that administrations do change, allowing the flexibility for us to come back and reconsider this, I would propose a sunset for January 1st, 2029.
Okay, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? I'll second that motion. Okay, any discussion on the motion? No discussion. All those in favor of Representative Sherwood's motion to put a sunset date of January 1st, 2029, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. All right, that carries. Go ahead, Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back to page 4, line 1. I offer a compromise between July 1st and effective immediately and would suggest March 31.
Seconded by Sherwood. Any discussion on the amendment? Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to see, as a standard, do we normally do, I've seen a March 1st. I don't know if I've seen a March 31st. I just was wondering why we came to that.
Representative Harrelson, we can do whatever we want.
Love it. Perfect. Good answer.
All right, further discussion on the amendment? All right, you've heard the amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Okay, the effective date is, again, March 31st. Okay, March 31st. Ms. Childress, any other questions? Any comments on the bill? All right, seeing none, Ms. Childress, would you please call the roll? This is on House Bill 276 as amended.
Roll call, House Bill 276 do pass with amendments. Representative Alleman? Aye. Representative Angelos?
Aye.
Representative Harrelson? Aye. Representative Pendergraft?
No.
Representative Sherwood?
No.
Representative Smith?
No.
Chairman Bear?
No.
Mr. Chairman, 3 aye, 4 no.
Thank you all very much for your work. We are adjourned. We have to get down there in a few minutes.